understanding modernist literature. My goal here is threefold: to shed some light on the historical, social, and cultural context of modernism, to highlight the break with the 19th century traditional storytelling, and to outline the new features and subject matters of modernist literature in broad terms, and European fiction more specifically. But first, what is modernism? Modernism is a philosophical movement of the late 19th century and early 20th century. Along with cultural changes, it reached its climax in Western society between 1900 and the mid-1920s and lasted roughly up to 1950. Based on the underlying belief in the progress of society, modernism applies to the work of writers and artists, amongst others, who experienced humanity's gloomiest hours. The shattering effects of the Great Depression in the 1930s lasted until the beginning of the Second World War. This economic downturn was considered the worst in the history of the industrialized world. Amongst the factors that helped shape modernism were the modern industrial rise of societies and, more importantly, cities. The overriding atmosphere of the early 20th century was a horrific disillusionment resulting from the incongruities between 19th century male martial ideals and the post-war realities. The loss of religious authority brought about an identity crisis, especially in the European world, and an overall sense of distrust prevailed. Europe turned into a wasteland. It was prized by a young generation of American creative thinkers, though, who settled in Paris in the 1920s and had a significant impact on the modernist trend. They were known as the Lost Generation. The most emblematic figures were Ernest Hemingway, Scott Fitzgerald, and T.S. Eliot. Lost in this context means directionless, aimless, purposeless. Modernists captured the essence of the individual and expressed the spirit of the times, or what German philosophers call Zeitgeist. Matthew Arnold vividly pictured the predicament of the modern man, whom he saw as wandering between two worlds, one dead and the other powerless to be born. Modernist literature addressed aesthetic issues similar to those examined in other artistic forms, such as architecture, sculpture, painting, and music. Modernism informs the various fields of humanities, arts, sciences, and technologies. As stated by Chris Poldick in the concise Oxford Dictionary of Literary Terms, modernist writers consider themselves a literary avant-garde disengaged from bourgeois values, primarily in terms of narrative closure, individual heroic action, and the unconventional choices of the modernist new woman. Modernists rejected humanism's self-centeredness and the anthropocentric, as opposed to theocentric, certainty of Enlightenment thinking. It is worth noting here that Enlightenment, also called the Age of Reason, dominated the world of ideas in Europe during the 17th and 18th centuries. Modernism implies a sense of cultural crisis, which was both exhilarating and disturbing. It opened up a wide spectrum of new possibilities while questioning the formerly accepted canons. Modernist literature dislocates meaning from its regular context and consciously distorts shapes in an attempt to redesign them. Modernist literature is marked by the relativity of truth and thereby of knowledge, and the experimentation of new formal, stylistic, and semantic means of expression. Ezra Pound's 1934 injunction to make it new launched the aesthetics and ideology of the new modernist style. Modernist literature entails a reduction in the pre-eminence of history and concerns itself chiefly with the complexity of the modern urban life. To put it simply, modernist literature discards history. The broad thematic concerns of modernist literature are well summarized by German sociologist Georg Simmel as follows. The deepest problems of modern life derive from the claim of the individual to preserve the autonomy and individuality of his existence in the face of overwhelming social forces, of historical heritage, of external culture, and of the technique of life, quoted in the Metropolis and Mental Life. Modernism was distinguished by a meta-narrative. The term meta-narrative has two meanings. It is a narrative that explores the idea of storytelling by revealing its own constructedness or artificiality. And the term also refers to a story that provides a pattern for people's beliefs and gives context and direction to their experiences. An example of meta-narrative would be Amanda Strong's metafiction, The Hidden Monster, Monsters Among Us. Modernist literature distanced itself from Romanticism, daringly delving into the most mundane subject matters that had traditionally been regarded as taboo for such a refined art form. Modernist literature displays a pessimism that contrasts with 19th century Victorian optimism. It portrays the desperate entanglements of urban dwellers caught in their decaying settings. Modernist literature grew out as a revolt against realism and naturalism. It moved away from their conservative values by introducing innovative concepts such as disruptive narratives. Modernist novelists combined past images with the modern themes of desperation, alienation, the self and society as being overwhelmed by irrational forces, etc., thereby using collage techniques in their works of art. Modernist poets likewise defied all expectations by leaving traditional rhyme schemes and writing in free verse. This trend is most vibrantly exemplified by Arab poets such as Nazik al-Malaika, Badr Shakir, As-Sayyab, and Abdul Wahab al-Bayati. In the modernist work of George Eliot's The Waste Land, 1922, with Agliabad, there is no unifying figure, no central hero, as modernists rejected the syllogism of romantics like Percy Shelley and Lord Byron. The modernist narrative is scattered, and the multiple voices that constitute its frame overlap. The 20th century novel was inspired by social, economic, political, and scientific changes. It was shaped by the experiences of wars that triggered enemy and nihilistic responses. Playwrights typically associated with the theater of the absurd, such as Samuel Beckett and Harold Pinter, best illustrate this profound cynicism. 19th century pioneers helped shape the modern view of the world. Foremost amongst them, Charles Darwin, Karl Marx, and Sigmund Freud. Darwin, Marx, and Freud decentered man from his comfort zone at the core of the universe, thereby provoking ideological disquiet. A century and a half after Darwin's publication of his groundbreaking book on the origin of species, published in 1859, the public debate between creationists and evolutionists is still ongoing. Marx, with his revolutionary concepts of socialism and class struggle, revealed the historical and material determinisms governing human societies. Freud laid the foundation for psychoanalysis, favoring the subconscious or impulses over the consciousness or free will by encouraging introspection, self-analysis. Freud influenced modernists. Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis is a good example to illustrate this trend. Modern fiction became a laboratory where the living processes relating to literary discourse and techniques can be ceaselessly performed or enacted. Amongst the modernist novelists, some focused on social change, while others investigated the human nature. The iconic British novelist Virginia Woolf declared that human nature underwent a fundamental change on or about December 1910. To that end, this lecture invites students to investigate the forces that prompted such a significant change or breakthrough in human nature, if it can be called that. Modernists prioritized characters' emotional conflicts over dramatic external events, as they thought that the sharpest tensions were most likely to occur in the psyche than in the real world. Thereby, the modernist novel ceased to be a mere reflection of nature and began to scrutinize the character's innermost selves. Modernism became aware that the mirror held up to nature by realists can only capture the surface. Here is a passage from Virginia Woolf's essay, Modern Fiction, published in 1919, that clearly shows the limitations of realism. She says, "Examine for a moment an ordinary mind on an ordinary day. The mind receives a myriad impressions, trivial, fantastic, evanescent, or engraved with the sharpness of steel. From all sides they come, an incessant shower of innumerable atoms, and as they fall, as they shape themselves into the life of Monday or Tuesday, the accent falls differently from of all. The moment of importance came not here, but there." Woolf's essay presents a shift in focus from the materialist world to the perceiving subject. The most truthful experience about the characters is their internal balance, that is to say, their inward responses to external stimuli. Modern fiction is characterized in a nutshell by the following basic features. Non-linear plotting. Writers are more focused upon the mental processes of the characters than on order and meaning. The traditional chronological narrative does not at all concern the modernists who experimented with novelty. Another feature that characterizes modern fiction is not compliance with the conventional rules of grammar, syntax, and punctuation. There is also the free use of indirect speech and allusion to myths and stories from another epoch. The abundance of figures of speech, such as hyperbole, irony, metaphor, and personification, is also a key feature of modern fiction. The main focus in modernist literature is on Impressionism and interior monologues. Modernists attempted to render impressionistic thoughts and to portray dream states and psychic realms inaccessible to normal consciousness. The following passage from Virginia Woolf's The Waves, published in 1931, is hence very telling. How much better is silence, the coffee cup, the table. How much better to sit by myself, like the solitary seabird that opens its wings on the stake. Let me sit here forever with bare things, this coffee cup, this knife, this fork, things in themselves, myself being myself. Modernists question any stable existence. They value the emotional time of the subject instead of the external clock. The theories of time developed by French philosopher Henri Bergson help us to grasp the breaking up of the narrative continuity. The irrational flow of consciousness is the style that modernists treasure the most. It is particularly flamboyant in Stream of Consciousness, writing by Virginia Woolf, James Joyce, William Faulkner, and Claude Simon. William James coined the term stream of consciousness in the late 19th century, which later became the hallmark of modernists. Ultimately, there is a continuum in the characters' minds. The past, the present, and the future become endlessly intertwined. To sum up, modernism can be defined as a literary, artistic, philosophical, and intellectual movement that rejected tradition and investigated new forms of expression. Modernists rebelled against clear-cut storytelling from the 19th century. They fragmented their narratives to better reflect the dislocation of society during and after the First World War. Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman are regarded as the parents of the movement. The British icon of modernism, Virginia Woolf, passed away on March 28, 1941. Today, the world is celebrating her life instead of death. Virginia Woolf is actually still alive in our hearts, souls, and minds. Writers, artists, and thinkers actually never die. Today, humanity is celebrating not the extinction, but the endless rise, rebirth, renaissance of an outstanding woman who had a huge impact on literature and on the life of people in general. Thank you so much. Blessed be.